morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're listening in from. Welcome to another Channel 5 live stream. With me, as always, Mr. Kevin Lancaster. How's it going, Kevin?
I mean, you got that intro down. You're like your tagline and the way it just flows. It's smooth. Well done.
Copyright Truman Show, but yeah, sure.
Oh, it's a little bit different than Truman Show, but you know, just trying to give you a compliment.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So we're like, 6 days from our first pitch.
Yeah. So it was very exciting. Great feedback. Lots of lessons learned. There's always things you can improve on, and I think part of what we wanted to share with people that are listening is the feedback, because a huge component of this event is actual feedback. It's anonymous feedback, and we're not going to name names or anything like that, but just really interesting insights on for both MSPs and vendors in the space. And we want to make sure that we let people know what kind of went down, and then some tips and tricks that I think we noticed on what possibly resonates more on in virtual events than because it was definitely different dynamics of how every presenter did things in this event. And so I think definitely want to touch on some of that, but maybe just, I guess, Kevin, just overall for you, how was the experience?
The experience, Matt, was pretty interesting. So the premise, well, one thing, the great news is that we validated the premise that this is one of the things that's really missing in the industry. Kind of this condensed, simplified, cut the BS, cut the fluff format presentation from the vendors. And so from that perspective, I think it was an absolute home run. And the presenters, many of them the CEOs of the companies that presented, they did just a bang up job. They just did great. I'm really pleased with the fact that a lot of them took our advice in the format and how best to present to the audience. That's one of the most important things, I think, in all of this, is that we worked with the vendors, half hour, an hour, a couple different sessions to say, look, this is the format. This is what the audience wants to hear. This is what an MSP owner, technician, somebody in sales and marketing, this is what they want to hear. They want to hear, how am I going to make money? How am I going to become more efficient? How am I going to make my customers more secure? How am I going to become more profitable? Right. That's kind of the first thing. Set the stage, just cut to the chase, and then get to the point where it warrants the technical deep dive. Because a lot of, Matt, you've talked about it. I talk about it all the time. A lot of the presentations that you see out there, it's vomiting everything under the sun about the product and the company, and it's just way too much. So that perspective, I think it was fantastic. A couple of the challenges, however, right, just as the first event, we had to scale servers quickly up front, just based on the demand, the number of people that were logging in. That was something that we really shot ourselves in the foot, from the jump, just not realizing how strong of the demand, and the fact that we had almost 100 people register, in the last hour leading up to the event. So I think we would have even more people on if we had a more seamless registration process. We're working on that. I think we've actually improved that, fixed that. And then we certainly had a snafu at the end with using a third-party tool like Zoom for these links. And so definitely some lessons learned. But in general, for the first pitch, the quality of the presentation, the feedback, the analytics that we're able to provide anonymously are just fantastic. And it's exactly what we want to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, look, certainly, I guess, a good problem, obviously, having so many people trying to join at once. And like you said, it was really crazy how many registrations we got in that last hour prior. And really, I've experienced over the last 2 years now, I guess, every virtual event has had some issue one time of that login issue. It's happened to the biggest players in the space. But like you said, lesson learned from that. Also, if you're out there listening, we always love comments. We always love to know where you're listening in from. Alex Corson wrote this so cool. I didn't realize you're giving results right here live. So yeah, we're giving some of the results out. We're talking a little bit about some of the award winners and some of the feedback that MSPs provided. One of Kevin, I think one of the most interesting stats that we pulled out of this, and it was an aggregate of all the 8 vendors, and it really speaks to, I think, a couple things. I mean, obviously we had some really emerging vendors, right? So you have like Servacity, who maybe less people in the industry have heard from, and they're really just getting on the scene. And then we have a couple, that have been around, but it was during COVID times also, so you couldn't really be at the events. In aggregate, the response to have you heard of this vendor before across the board was 55% of these MSPs had not heard of a vendor, essentially, that they were listening from the pitch. And it goes to 2 points that I would say. One, we often think everybody knows who we are. I certainly felt that way at IDH, and I was like, I know everybody in this industry. And then, we got acquired at Kaseya, and we went to a Kaseya, and I was like, I don't know any of these. It's such a bigger market. And then, by the way, majority, I mean, like 60% of MSPs attend one or less events in person, even pre-COVID. So there's still a vast majority of, or a large portion of the MSP community that actually doesn't attend events at all in person. But there's a perception, I think, that we all are attending these in person, and it's not true. And so I thought that stat really stood out from that perspective. And then just brand recognition, right? It's, somebody might have had a booth at a if you have a booth at IT Nation, you're one of 105 vendors. You don't have a speaking slot. Somebody may not even see you, and they don't remember you. So this is where I think this is really interesting, because again, you're getting the chance, obviously, to speak essentially on a main stage. So that was just a stat that I thought was really interesting, that across the board, 55% had never heard of a vendor, essentially.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting to take that a step further. There were a couple of vendors that had been around for a while in the industry, and I think it was assumed that everybody had heard of them. And I'm looking at one in particular, and we'll another slide we'll share. It's more of an aggregate, a blend of everybody. But this one particular vendor, had almost 50% of the audience had not or had heard of them, right? So 46% of the audience had heard of them, but they're not a current partner, right? And then another 38% were or had never heard of them. So think about that. So for this one particular vendor, they've been around for a while in I think a hot space within the MSP market. 38% had never heard of them, and then 46% had heard of them, but they're not a current partner. So the data that we're able to generate back to these organizations is pretty powerful, right? It should help them direct their message or guide their message moving forward, and their marketing dollars, how they market to the audience. How does 50% of this audience, which it's a very that the attendees are across the spectrum of MSP IT service provider demographics, the fact that 50% had never heard of them, or heard of them but not a partner, and then another 38% had never heard of them. That's pretty jarring when you consider they've been around for so long. So getting that type of feedback to these organizations, I think it's important. So it certainly is going to help the emerging vendors shape how they enter the market and what they do to create brand recognitions. But again, the ones that have been around for a while that they may have thought that they had their marketing dialed in or their outreach dialed in, they may have to think about how they're going to market, how they're getting in front of the audience, and in a little bit different manner or capacity. So it's great to be able to provide, again, that qualitative and quantitative data back to these vendors, based on how this community is reacting to their pitch. So it's just taking that a step further. It's great to see that type of really rich data come out of this. And as we progress, and we'll have a really interesting real-time data to share across the market, and hopefully that helps vendors do a better job of getting in front and supporting their partners.
Yeah, well, now I guess, and we'll come back to the vendor side of it, but but I know you also, and we both separately and our team received all kinds of feedback from MSPs that attended. So I definitely want to shift gears a little bit to any MSPs that are listening to this and kind of feeling like maybe they didn't attend. And it's what was the response? I guess that you got. I'll talk a little bit about response I got, but some of the response that you received from MSPs, because I know you got emails because you forwarded some of them to me.
Yeah, that was another great great benefit or result of this, especially after we had the hiccups with the breakout rooms. It's great to just after that get flooded with emails and comments on LinkedIn. But I think the industry, the reaction was, this is fantastic. This is exactly what we need. You say this often, right? There's a time and a place for education, and there's a ton of events out there for education and understanding the trends and, in providing kind of that fluff in support of messaging and what have you. But the reaction was, this is exactly what we needed. It's like you're getting to the point in a lot efficient, lot better manner. And I think it was pretty cool to see is the volume of additional feedback that was provided by the audience. So one of the questions, had a comment section. So feel free to elaborate on your thoughts. And, of course, there were very, as you would expect, some very poignant MSP comments. Like one in particular was, do not engage with companies that require minimum spend. That was I think a recurring theme. There are a couple others in the responses here. I'm looking at it, probably about 40 or 50 here. Couple were really thankful, so much synergy, looking forward to connecting, great presentation. There was questions about whether some of the products were FIPS 140. So they're actually like really asking direct questions and providing direct feedback, which is great.
Yeah. And I think it was very similar themes that I had, but yeah, it was interesting. I actually had a one-on-one call with an MSP not related to the event, but then they did tell me they attended the event, and she was just talking about, she's like, oh, there was several vendors I hadn't heard of, and she's in business with her husband, and like there were certain ones that she wanted her husband to check out and to further evaluate. So she sent him a link, and I should mention, even if you were not able to attend the first one, if you just go to channelprogram.com, Kevin, all 8 pitches are featured there now on demand. And they're 7 minutes, and you can watch them at 2 speed. That was I'm a big proponent of being able to watch certain things, especially when it's not live in 2 speed, because depending on people's cadence, it's very understandable. So I listen to all my podcasts and videos in 2 speed usually. So,
you just move twice as fast as everybody else.
I guess so. I just gotta go.
Moral of the story. I'll share a couple of the. Let me see if I can share maybe.
And shout out to Jennifer. Thank you for doing this today. So helpful to have this insight. And Jennifer, we're gonna definitely even provide, I think, really other interesting insights from the actual presentations themselves. And these tips can really should resonate with anybody who is doing a virtual presentation. And some might be obvious, and sometimes we just need reminders of this stuff.
Absolutely.
But Kevin, what were you saying you were going to pull up?
All right. So can you see my screen here?
Yes.
Great. So as you mentioned, this is one of the kind of the aggregated slides. And to your point, this is a blend of the presenters. So 55% of the audience, on average, had not heard of the presenting companies. And then you get down to value propositions. These products help me grow revenue. Surprisingly, and that's a theme that a lot of vendors talk about. Like, we're going to help you grow your ARR, your MRR. It's going to be the most profitable. But the perception on the other end is, again, this is the blend across all of the presenters. That was only 15% of the audience, or there was only 50% of the value proposition or perceived value proposition across all the vendors. And then, did the products meet unanswered customer needs or unmet customer needs? And there's some value proposition work that needs to be done, right? Neither agree nor disagree. Somewhat agree. Strongly disagree was low, which is great. strongly agree was, quarter of the results. So
Yep.
it's really, really interesting, some of the feedback. Enablement, this is a theme and something we're just going to hammer moving forward. I've got a newsletter coming out on enablement here, I think early next week. But, this is something that vendors need to pay close attention to moving forward. All right. So a quarter of the audience, just over a quarter of the audience said that they strongly agree with, how strong channel enablement was within these presentations. All right. And then you have, again, neither disagrees, kind of neutral. You have a, kind of a somewhat agree. Now, good news is that the disagree, side of the house was pretty low, but, general, it shows a lot of ambiguity here, right? Between 70% of the market is kind of like, to, somewhat agree.
That's what I guess I would look at. It's like basically 75% of the audience is saying,
Yeah.
Like,
and that's exactly it.
So, I mean, and when you come up on renewals, isn't going to do it always. So
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely
it's really
not.
interesting.
So this is the, you vendors out there, this is what we're working on in 2022. So get your pencils ready, get your budgets ready, because it's all about enablement in 2022. I said 2022, right? 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And then differentiation. Again, this is a blend across 8 vendors, right? But are we really differentiating? It's something I always hammer on with my consulting engagements, right? In particular segments, won't call the vendors out in this one, but in particular segments, everybody looks the same. Maybe the logo is a little bit different color, maybe it's a different shade of blue or whatever, but for the most part, everybody sounds the exact same, right? So this drove me nuts when I was acquiring companies, where I would sit through pitch presentations, and after the first minute, I could tell that you're going to say the exact same thing the last 5 companies I looked at just said. And the next slide is probably going to be the hacker with the hoodie. And, it's so predictable. So between enablement and differentiation, these are 2 things that, vendors, you guys got to get your S together in 2022. And we're going to be hammering that messaging and really, coaching these companies to differentiate. So,
and it's critical, for the MSPs to be the driving. A lot of time, I mean, that's what gets stuff done, right? I mean, the MSPs are the driving factors for all this. Without the MSPs, success, your vendor doesn't have success, and that's why this format's such a great thing, is that it gives more voice to a community, the MSPs, that don't feel like they have much of a voice right now.
Right.
And by the way, Kevin, I'm part of the metaverse. I'm not only here live, but I'm commenting live. So thank you all for listening in.
I gotta lie down.
Yeah. So I do want to transition, and I guess we'll talk about the first of 3 award winners from the event, and as taken literally from the feedback from the MSPs directly, because I took a couple of takeaways that I put a video out about it, and our winner for best pitch was Colin Knox of Gradient, and it's interesting because he was the one vendor who chose to go no PowerPoint slide deck, right? He went straight camera. Now he's also a veteran. He's spoken on the scene, well known. So I think that all those factors played in, and I don't think you have to only. I don't think it's bad to do PowerPoint slides, but I do think kind of my tip 1 was, in these formats, and you never know, right? The type of format you're in, whether your screen with your video, when you start doing a share screen, how big the video component's going to be. So one of my takeaways, again, and I'm not saying you have to go fully on just camera, but in the start and the end of your presentation, I would highly suggest starting in camera mode. Like, have your opportunity to connect directly first, then open up the slide, essentially, then share your screen. And then at the end, when you're doing your closing statement, same thing. Get off the slide deck and just speak directly to the audience. I think those little things can make a big difference. Tip 2, and this really did come from feedback from people, because there's people attending virtual events that come in 10 minutes late, 20 minutes late, 30 minutes late. It's kind of the nice thing about virtual events is you can kind of come in. But one of the feedbacks we got was in terms of branding, to make sure you have some level of branding somewhere in your presentation. So that could be one on your polo shirt, or depending on what you're wearing, it could be the logo like we have at the top here or there. But really on the slide decks particularly, having your logo on each slide, because Kevin, if you come in 30 minutes into into the event and I'm on slide 5 and you've never heard of me, you don't even know what company I am and what company I'm representing. So that was one of the feedback we actually got from quite a few MSPs, was around the branding component. And then the final one was really, and again, some of this kind of common sense, but just being more conversational. And I think in a virtual environment, sometimes we have scripts in front of us, right? It's very easy for me to put up a Microsoft Word document directly in front of me, and I can read from it and look pretty smooth in terms of that, hey, he's not reading. But sometimes when you read, you do it in a way that it's pretty obvious you're reading, because you don't speak like you normally would in public. And so that would be my tip. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with having notes, but you can't just read directly from it, because it is pretty obvious. So you got to build in your normal conversational a way of talking, and it can be hard, because sometimes, I mean, you're not getting instant feedback, and sometimes even asking audience like asking a question, even if they can't directly answer it online. So those were the 3 takeaways that I had from myself, and then some of the feedback from the community.
I wonder, all this Zoom over the last 2 years, if that's helped to make people better presenters, right? Because you have to look at the camera, and everyone's doing these virtual meetings. I wonder if there's a net positive gain out of that down line, in the future, with people learning to look at a camera and talk at the same time. So I don't know how you actually track or quantify that, but interesting.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, because I mean, again, if you're now used to having your notes right in front of you, and now in person you don't have quite those notes. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. But to your point though, about best presentation, I think Colin did a fantastic job of just free flowing, and it was structured, and you can tell he was well rehearsed. There was a comment though. I think there was a piece of feedback that there was a couple of positive feedback comments in there about the presentation without slides. Kudos, good job. But I think there were 1 or 2 that were it'd be good to have a frame of reference of what you're talking through, kind of a slide. And so at the end of the day, it's stylistic. There's personal preference.
Yeah.
But I think did a darn good job of communicating effectively, what they're trying to get across. And so great job to Colin and his crew with Gradient getting that knocked out.
Yeah, and also shout out to Paul Redding of Compliancy Group, who was the runner-up, very close runner-up, and was doing it from his hotel room. So I think that deserves a special shout out as well to Paul.
Yes, absolutely.
And then for innovation excellence, which we based off of a variety of data points from what you showed on your charts. Jim Lippy and SAS Alerts took home innovation excellence. And I know they had a very positive experience. And again, it just goes back to the audiences that I think we're able to tap into for this are not necessarily the same audiences that you're seeing at every other event potentially.
No, you're absolutely right. And remember, the premise of this is that you're coming in anonymously, providing feedback anonymously, and you have the ability to engage if you like. And the fact that they had so many engage is great. It's a testament to Jim's ability to communicate their value proposition. I will say also that Jim really followed the format, right? I mean, almost to a T, which was great.
Yeah, he even used our slide deck.
He did. We provided a kind of a very generic slide deck to everybody, just as a guide or frame of reference, and he followed it to a T. And look, I like to say that's that's why they did well. It has to be one of the reasons why, other than Jim's fantastic presentation. But it was great. think Jim put a comment out on one of our posts saying, for them, it was the best ROI or best event they've had all year. Right.
Yep.
So that's huge. And so great job to Jim Lippy and everybody over at SaaS Alerts.
Yeah, and finally, just kind of overall feedback, overall program, best channel program, Armor took home that, and team Christine and Ryan was presenting and did a fantastic job again, getting over on their value prop, and Christine and that team are doing really cool things over there, and they certainly know how to get people's attention.
I see the next T-shirt, Team Christine. See her next slogan. I mean, talk about a channel, Jedi Knight or Master. I mean, she's just, phenomenal. She just knows this marketplace really well, and she's really dialed in their messaging, their value proposition. They came on extremely strong. Everybody, every presenter did fantastic. But if we look at we take, some of the pie charts that we showed, and we break them down, and then we create a formula to determine, based on the feedback, who takes home these prizes. It was clear that Armor was deserving of this one. So great job to them as well.
Yeah, and look, shout out to everybody who participated. We had Mail Protector, Zorus, Servacity, Wasabi as well. All brought different things, and most got really positive feedback and are going to be having lots of conversations. I'm really curious actually who won Wasabi's giveaway, which was really cool. Yeah. for the I think 4 tickets to Fenway Park's first college football bowl game. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, when we've got, next month, I think it's going to be January 21st. I'll put up the registration. It's very easy. You can go there to register. But we've got, right now we've kind of a quick preview, just, some of them that are going to be participating. Zomentum, Nerdio, and Verosoft, Speartip, Hook Security. So, a couple veterans there, but also some really, really emerging ones. I think Speartip, this might be the first place they're going to be speaking to the community. So it's really, really cool to see some of that.
That's fantastic. But I will tell you, Matt, I mean, we say veterans, but again, based on the feedback from the first one,
I know.
Right? It's that's a relative term, right? It's a relative term in this industry. I've said a number of times, right? We think of channel and especially if you've been on the circuit the last couple of years, channel and MSPs are relatively well defined, but the definition of channel is broad. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of quote unquote channel partners out there. So it's not surprising for some of them that had been around for, in some cases, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. It's not surprising that, they would get feedback saying that half the audience had never heard of them. So I think that's a testament to just, it's a big market. You got to look for different ways to get out there and create the buzz, get the name out there, and generate leads and momentum. And I think this is one of the ways that this will be a staple moving forward for a lot of organizations. And so as we scale these events, we'll scale them, massively moving forward. It'd be great to get even more of this really direct feedback in out to the community. So this is start of something big. So I'm really pleased with what we were able to do last week. Hiccups aside, right? Or even hiccups included.
Yep.
The net of it was just a very positive experience for all.
Absolutely. And, again, that the next one can be January 21st. You can now register. It was really great. We had almost 100 pre-registrations before we even were talking about it, essentially. So that's great. I think it's also worth mentioning, if we still have people out there listening, and you've held on for this long, the last couple of weeks we have obviously honed in very much and talked about channel pitch, and it was our first one. But I do want to make a mention. We are going to be going back into certain formats and bringing on guests that we think are going to bring value to everybody that's out there listening, and lots of guests from outside of the channel, real marketing wizards and real cool entrepreneurs and things like that. So I think it's worth mentioning that, because we're not always going to be here kind of talking about channel pitch specifically, but it was our first one, so of course we're going to talk about it, and we definitely wanted to provide the results, of course. So
Yeah, no, well said. Yeah, we will definitely get back to mixing it up and making this more meaningful and exciting for everybody.
Absolutely.
So
All right.
what's on the docket for the next couple of days? Anything big?
I got a lot of meetings. I got a lot of calls to do with people, both on both sides. Vendors that are interested and MSPs that are wanting to get feedback or are interested. I know we're going to be coming out with the individual profiles and explore where MSPs is going to be able to create a voice for themselves and really be able to provide thought leadership to their own community. And so, we already had several people reach out to us. And for the MSPs, I'll put my direct email address. You can just email me and let me know that you're interested, and we'll be able to provide you with a free profile in our platform.
Awesome.
I don't know. What about on your end, Kevin? Anything else?
Just more debrief. Make sure we get this platform dialed in, and to your point, we're going to be working behind the scenes to really get this platform to scale over the next couple of weeks. So excited. Got now 4 or 5 additional job ads out there over the last 24 hours. So the team is growing quite rapidly. So if there's something that matches your background, the job posts we have out there on LinkedIn or Indeed, feel free to let us know about it. So no, it's just a lot of growth. It's getting back into the startup grind and scaling, but this is, as we mentioned, I wouldn't say it's a social experiment, but it's part social experiment. It's industry, it's industry driven, it's democratized. And so I'm just pumped about what we're going to be able to do with this thing in 2022 and beyond.
For sure. All right. Well, Kevin, thanks for, not tuning in. I guess you were participating, but thank you.
I have to be here, right?
Yeah. Thank you to everybody for tuning in, and even if you're watching it in replay, we appreciate it. And join us on the 21st and keep watching us live. Thank you.
Thank you.